What happens when a superpower's naval commander laughs at an underdog's tactics, only to watch his entire fleet get outmaneuvered in minutes? Before we dive into this fascinating tactical scenario, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Today, we're exploring a hypothetical military exercise that demonstrates everything naval strategists study about modern asymmetric warfare and unconventional tactics. Imagine the South China Sea during a theoretical joint naval exercise. In our scenario, a senior naval commander we'll call Admiral Chin stands on the bridge of an advanced destroyer leading a modern fleet. His vessels bristle with missiles and sophisticated radar systems. Across the water, 15 small fishing boats bob innocuously. Chin dismisses them as insignificant. This fictional scenario explores what military theorists call the David versus Goliath problem in modern naval warfare. In this hypothetical exercise, international observers have organized a simulation to test asymmetric warfare tactics. A smaller nation volunteers their Mosquito fleet strategy, using agile vessels against conventional naval power. A larger nation sends advanced ships and experienced commanders, confident in their technological superiority. This scenario allows us to explore real tactical principles that military academies teach worldwide about unconventional warfare and strategic innovation. Our fictional commander, Maria Santos, leads the smaller force. In this scenario, she studied naval battles throughout history where smaller forces defeated larger ones. Her inspiration comes from ancient naval warfare, guerrilla tactics, and modern drone swarm theory. She's combined these concepts into a revolutionary approach. Her boats carry no heavy weapons in our scenario, just speed, coordination, and brilliant tactical planning that demonstrates real-world strategic principles. The hypothetical exercise rules are straightforward. The larger fleet must maintain a defensive perimeter around a designated zone, simulating island protection. The smaller boats must penetrate this perimeter and tag the command ship using laser designators. GPS tracking scores simulated hits. In our scenario, Admiral Chin dismisses the challenge, confident his radar will detect anything approaching from 50 kilometers away. This overconfidence becomes a critical teaching point. What makes this scenario educational is how Santos exploits real technological limitations. Modern naval warfare depends on radar, satellites, and electronic systems. These tools work brilliantly against conventional threats like missiles or submarines. But they have documented weaknesses. They're optimized for high-value targets. Small wooden boats barely register on sophisticated systems designed for supersonic threats. This vulnerability exists in actual military technology and has been documented in defense studies. Our simulation begins at dawn. Destroyers form a classic defensive screen with phased array radars sweeping the ocean. Helicopters patrol with thermal imaging. Everything seems perfect initially. The crew tracks every vessel within a 100-kilometer radius. Then Santos gives her first order, and 15 boats scatter in seemingly random directions. The operators watch, confused but unconcerned. This reflects real tactical doctrine about overwhelming defensive systems. In our scenario, Santos divides her fleet into 3 groups. 5 boats head directly toward the perimeter at maximum speed, engines roaring. These are decoys designed to attract attention. Another 5 boats circle far to the east, maintaining distance but staying visible. The final 5 boats simply stop their engines and drift with the current. This tactic demonstrates real principles from military deception doctrine taught at defense colleges worldwide. The 5 drifting boats in our scenario have shut down all electronics, becoming nearly invisible to radar. They deploy sea anchors to control drift, using ocean currents and wind to approach slowly. These traditional wooden vessels sit low in the water with minimal radar signature. Moving at barely 2 knots, automated systems filter them as background noise. This exploits what radar engineers call the clutter problem, a real technical challenge in modern sensor systems. Santos had studied something called the clutter problem in radar theory. Modern systems are so sensitive they pick up waves, seabirds, and floating objects. To prevent operator overload, systems automatically filter slow-moving, small returns. Her drifting boats fell perfectly into this filtered category. They appeared as slight blips that operators ignored, focusing instead on the active threats moving quickly on their screens. 2 hours into the exercise, Chin grew impatient. The visible Filipino boats maintained their distance, occasionally approaching before retreating when engaged. It seemed like a timid, ineffective strategy. Chin called Santos on the radio, suggesting they stop wasting everyone's time with this amateur performance. Santos replied calmly, asking him to check his 6 o'clock position. Chen's smile vanished when he turned around. 5 Filipino boats sat motionless just 800 meters behind his flagship. They drifted through his entire defensive perimeter undetected. In a real combat scenario, they would have been close enough to launch torpedoes, drop mines, or deploy suicide drones. The laser designators on each boat painted Chen's ship, registering 5 simultaneous hits. The international observers confirmed the catastrophic breach in Chinese defenses. The radio exploded with confused Chinese chatter. Officers demanded explanations from radar operators. How did 5 boats penetrate multiple layers of sensors undetected? The operators reviewed their logs, finding only minor clutter signals they'd automatically dismissed. Chen's face flushed red. He ordered his helicopters to investigate, but the exercise rules prohibited retroactive responses. The damage was done. Santos had proven her point spectacularly. But Santos wasn't finished. The 5 eastern boats suddenly accelerated, splitting into a star pattern and approaching from multiple vectors simultaneously. Each boat zigzagged unpredictably, changing speed and direction every 30 seconds. This created a targeting nightmare. Chinese systems could track them but struggled to predict their movements. In the time it took to plot one boat's trajectory, it had already changed course twice. This tactic exploited another weakness in modern naval warfare: the decision loop. Advanced ships have incredible firepower but require human authorization for engagement. Operators must identify threats, assess intentions, receive authorization, and execute responses. Against slow-moving, erratic targets, this process became confused and delayed. The boats seemed simultaneously threatening and harmless, fast then slow, committed then retreating. Chinese crews hesitated, unsure how to respond. Santos had studied the OODA loop concept developed by military strategist John Boyd. Observe, orient, decide, act. By constantly changing her boat's behavior, she forced Chinese operators to restart their decision loop continuously. They'd observe a boat approaching fast, orient their weapons, decide to engage, then watch the boat slow down and turn away. Before they could act, another boat would approach from a different angle, restarting the entire process. The zigzagging boats closed to within 3 kilometers before being destroyed by simulated missile fire. But their real purpose had been distraction. While Chinese operators focused on these visible threats, the 5 boats that had penetrated earlier now activated previously silent engines. They scattered in different directions, each heading toward a different Chinese vessel. The defensive screen had been completely compromised from within. Chen ordered his ships to break formation and engage the internal threats. This created exactly the chaos Santos had anticipated. As destroyers maneuvered to target boats inside their perimeter, they blocked each other's firing solutions. Communication channels overloaded with conflicting orders. 3 vessels nearly collided while pursuing the same target. The carefully planned defensive formation dissolved into confused individual actions. Modern coordination systems failed under unconventional pressure. International observers watched in amazement as the final phase unfolded. The 5 destroyed decoy boats, still technically in play under exercise rules, suddenly reactivated. They'd been drifting with engines off, simulating damaged vessels. Now they roared back to life, charging through the gaps in the broken Chinese formation. Within 15 minutes, every Chinese vessel had been tagged multiple times by boats they dismissed as eliminated or irrelevant. When our hypothetical exercise ends, the sophisticated fleet has been theoretically defeated by boats worth a fraction of their cost. Radar systems failed against unconventional approaches. Defensive doctrine crumbled under creative tactics. Overwhelming technological advantage meant nothing against unconventional precision execution. This scenario illustrates principles that military strategists worldwide study. Technology alone doesn't guarantee victory without adaptive doctrine and tactical creativity. The hypothetical debriefing in our scenario reveals important lessons. Officers might argue the exercise was unrealistic, that real missiles would destroy boats easily, that artificial rules tied their hands. But observers counter that war itself has rules, fog, and friction preventing perfect execution. The scenario exploits real vulnerabilities in real systems using tactics any determined adversary could replicate with minimal resources, reflecting actual asymmetric warfare theory. What makes our hypothetical strategy so revolutionary is its accessibility. It doesn't require exotic technology or massive resources. The tactics rely on understanding enemy systems better than they understand themselves. They exploit gaps between what advanced sensors detect and what human operators notice. They use speed variation, misdirection, and chaos to overwhelm coordination systems. These are real principles that defense analysts and military planners study continuously. The story leaked within weeks, creating shockwaves through naval circles worldwide. Smaller nations realized they weren't helpless against superpowers. Naval planners began reevaluating doctrine that assumed technological superiority guaranteed victory. Santos became a guest speaker at defense colleges globally. Chin, meanwhile, was quietly reassigned to administrative duties. The exercise had embarrassed China's naval modernization program publicly and undeniably. The implications extended beyond naval warfare. Santos had demonstrated how asymmetric thinking could overcome apparently insurmountable advantages. Her tactics applied to cyber warfare, drone operations, and even business strategy. The core principle remained consistent. Understand your opponent's systems, find the gaps between capability and awareness, and exploit those gaps with speed and coordination. Technology alone doesn't guarantee victory without wisdom guiding its use. Military historians compared Santos's tactics to famous underdog victories throughout history. The Battle of Marathon, where outnumbered Greeks defeated Persians through superior tactics. David defeating Goliath with a sling. Vietnamese guerrillas frustrating American firepower. The pattern repeated. Smaller forces studying their opponents obsessively, identifying specific vulnerabilities, and executing plans that turn strengths into weaknesses. Santos had joined this historical lineage with her brilliant modern adaptation. China responded by developing new protocols for detecting small vessel swarms. They invested millions in improved radar filtering, AI-assisted tracking, and revised defensive doctrines. But Santos had already moved on, developing new variations that exploited different vulnerabilities. The exercise had triggered an endless cycle. Every defensive improvement spawned new offensive innovations. Asymmetric warfare evolved faster than billion-dollar systems could adapt. The Philippines military took notice, incorporating Santos's tactics into official training. Other Southeast Asian nations requested joint exercises to learn the Mosquito Fleet strategy. Regional defense cooperation strengthened as smaller nations realized collective asymmetric capabilities could balance against larger powers. The exercise had shifted strategic calculations across an entire region, proving that clever tactics could compensate for limited budgets and smaller militaries. Today, naval planners worldwide study the Santos Doctrine. Military academies teach the exercise as a case study in asymmetric warfare. The incident reminded everyone that innovation, adaptability, and deep understanding of systems matter more than raw firepower. Santos proved that the human element, creativity, deception, and tactical brilliance, remains the ultimate weapon in warfare. Technology serves strategy, not the other way around. Our educational scenario teaches invaluable lessons about modern warfare. Never underestimate opponents based on appearance or resources. Never assume technological superiority equals victory. Never stop studying, learning, and adapting. The hypothetical humble boats accomplished what this teaching scenario intended, demonstrating how strategic capabilities can level playing fields against seemingly overwhelming advantages. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from strength, but from wisdom, creativity, and understanding your opponent better than they understand themselves.